All right, we're recording.
Thank you.
Perfect. And I am going to, as Christina mentioned, I'm going to have the chat open throughout tonight. So if you have any questions as we go, please add them to the chat and I'll cover them as we go through the presentation. And at the end, we should have some opportunity for a Q&A. And we are a small group tonight, which is great that we can get some really like personalized questions and information. And before we get started, I would love if you're able to, in the chat, let me know your level of Instagram experience. So are you a beginner? Are you experienced? Would you say you're intermediate? That just helps me get a sense of how to tailor the content for you. And my goal with these workshops is to give a wide range of helpful information. So whether you're just beginning, you'll get like some really great tips to set up for success. But if you're already established on the app on Instagram, then I'm going to give you some ways to take that to the next level. Awesome. So we have a good range in terms of how people are using it. And as I mentioned, yeah, we want to get those really like tangible takeaways so that there are things that you can do tomorrow on your Instagram. As Christina mentioned, my name's Kat. I'm the owner of Social Cat Media, which is a social media agency based in Peterborough, Ontario. And we work with small businesses across Canada to make social media not just tolerable, but fun and effective. In terms of what we're going to cover tonight, we're going to walk through kind of all the stages of what you need to know for creating content on Instagram. We're going to start with your profile and account optimization. We'll chat about the different types of content you can create, including reels, graphics, photos, and stories. And we'll also chat about engagement. And one of the things that I am most passionate about is boundaries. So we'll kind of wrap up tonight with how do we care for ourselves as business owners and people who have to be showing up online. So to get started, we're going to look at our profile and our account because this is what we need to then create content. And when we are putting all this effort into creating content, we want to make sure that our profile is doing the work to convert people. So if they saw a reel or someone maybe recommended your account, they come to your profile. We want to make sure that everything there is giving them the best information possible. So they want to know, they want to follow you, they want to go and work with you. So the first thing we want to look at when we're thinking about our Instagram account is making sure that we have a business account. So if you go to your Instagram profile, which in the bottom right, you'll see my little face icon on the bottom of my Instagram screen. So that click there to get to your profile. And you'll see here I have professional dashboard. So that lets me know that I have a business account. If you don't have a business account, you're going to click these three lines in the top right and go to settings and privacy. And under here, it says for professionals. Mine says business tools and controls because I already have a business account. But if you don't, there'll be an area here that prompts switch to a professional account. So that's where you'd go. Having a business account is completely free. The benefit of it is you get access to analytics and insights. So that information about your content, which is really important for making decisions on what's working and what's not. So I highly recommend that everyone gets a business account. I sometimes get asked the difference between a business account and a creator account. They're both types of professional accounts. The creator account really was designed for digital creators, so like influencers, content creators. And I always recommend businesses get the business one for better insights and the ability for Facebook and Instagram shopping, which we'll chat about as part of our account setup. The next piece of your profile setup is getting access to Instagram Music. So if you are a business account, you may have run into issues where you can't use every song available if you're looking for like in your stories or creating a reel. And this was a big problem for me as a big Taylor Swift fan. So there's a reel I made today featuring Taylor Swift. But there is a workaround for that. And it has to do with the category on your account. So under my name, you'll see it says entrepreneur here. And this entrepreneur category gives us access to the full library of Instagram music. So any songs that you could find on Spotify would be available to use for stories or reels. So in order to get that category on your account, you're just going to go to edit profile. And you'll see as I scroll down, it says public business information. And the second option is the category. Mine is already set to entrepreneur, but yours might say clothing store, health and wellness. And what you want to do is just search in entrepreneur and select it. And then you have the choice on whether you want that to display on your profile. So if entrepreneur doesn't quite, describe what you do perfectly, if you're a larger corporation or you just don't want that showing on your account, you can just toggle off the display on profile and you're still going to get the benefits of that entrepreneur category. But now on your profile, it doesn't show that category. And just while I have my mouse over here, at our last session, I got asked about what this number represents on my profile. And so just as an FYI, just for your information, this little badge here should be temporary. We'll see when Meta and Instagram make the change, but this has to do with signups for Meta's Twitter-like app called Threads. So this just has to do with the number, like what number I was creating a Threads account. So it was like the 2 millionth person. So if you don't have that on your account, totally okay. It just has to do with that Threads sign up. And Threads is definitely not like, you don't need to have it by any means. We actually saw a lot of a really fast like sign up and activity on it, and then like a very steady decline. So by no means do you need to have it, but that's just what that means. I don't really use it much anymore. The next thing we want to look at on our profile is your name. So when you look at your Instagram account, you both have your username or your handle, and that's what comes after the @ symbol. So in my case, it's @socialcatmedia. So then you also have your name, and the name is what lives above your bio. And so your bio is this little short piece of text here. And my name is Caterpillar Murphy, Social Cat Media. And when we look at our name, the key thing we want to incorporate here is our business name. But Instagram has also elongated how many characters we can put in this section, which allows us to add keywords in. So this part of your bio, of your profile, I should say, one of the most searchable things. So when people are typing in for search results, Instagram is pulling information from your name. So you want to think about different keywords that people might be using to look for your business. So it could be what you do. So if I was a wedding photographer and my business name was cherished memories, I might then put some emoji or some form of punctuation after my business name to kind of break it up. And then I could put wedding photographer in Bruce County. So I'm using both, like, location is a good thing to consider, where you're located and where your audience is, and also like your industry or what people might be searching for. You don't need to have your full name or your personal name in the section. I only do because I did pay for Meta verification to kind of test it out and see what that is. And so Meta verification is a paid subscription to Facebook and Instagram, which verifies your account. So this little blue check mark. And all it really does is give you extra account protection. So basically gives you access to like a human if you need help with something. And it helps with account protection in terms of like preventing hacking. And if your account got hacked, they would help you get it back. Those are the only real benefits of it. So for most small businesses, definitely not a necessity. But if you have a large audience on Instagram, I would recommend thinking about it. But for every account, what I recommend in terms of protecting your account is setting up two-factor verification or authentication so that, you know, when you put in your password, you're then getting a code to your cell phone, and ensuring that you have a strong password that you update like once a quarter, because we want to make sure that people aren't able to get into our Instagram account, because unfortunately it does happen quite often. The next piece, as we go down our profile, is looking at our bio. And this is our area to tell people what we do and how we can help them. It's only 150 characters, so you do have to think about like condensing it into something that's really going to grab people's attention. As I mentioned at the beginning, like if someone sees a piece of content and they come to your profile, you want to make sure that they have the right information right off the hop to decide, do I want to follow this person? Am I ready to work with them? Do I want to buy from them? So instead of just saying what you do, I'll use that wedding photographer example again. So I could say wedding photographer available, now booking summer 2024. But instead you want to think about like your point of differentiation. So like what makes you different than your competitors? So maybe it's like the style of the work you do, or parts of like your personality or your brand that make people want to buy from you or work with you. And you want to include that in there. So, and you think about like kind of like a tagline, like I have making social media not just tolerable, but fun and effective. That those terms, those phrases that make you and your business what it is. And the next piece of it is thinking about a call to action. And whenever we're thinking about content on social media, it's important to think about like what we want people to do after they've seen our content. And the same can be said about our bio. So what do we want people to do after they've come to our account? In this case, I'm promoting workshops. So I have a specific call to action prompting people to click the link on my account. But if you want people to book a free call with you or to shop your fall collection, you want to include that information right in your bio, because that link is right there. So you really want to promote people clicking that link and getting that information. Speaking of links, so the next piece of it is your link. And there's a few things to consider. This link area is one of the only places where links are clickable on Instagram. Basically, it's your stories and here. So a link written in a caption is not clickable. So you probably have seen people type in like link in bio for more information. So this is what they're talking about, going to that bio area and clicking this link. I have created on my website my own link curation page. So you may have seen people who use like Linktree or Campsite bio later. Linktree, like those ones that kind of curate those links for you. But I recommend if you have your website, it's really easy to create just like a unlinked page where you can add your buttons, make it super branded. You don't have to pay a third party to kind of create this, and it lives on your website, which is really great to kind of have that control and that ownership of that link. The other thing you can look at is Instagram now allows you to have up to 5 links directly in Instagram. So I'm going to go back into the edit profile. We have our bio. I'm going to go to the links. And right now I have that one link. I can add another one though, if I just wanted, let's say, to go to my homepage of my website. And now I have those 2 links. And when I go to my profile, now it shows I have socialcatmedia.com/links and one other. I click on that. It pulls up a little pop-up and people can choose which one. So a few different options in terms of giving all the information that you want to give in your link in bio, and making it as easy as possible for people to take that next step. So when you're thinking about what kind of content and products and services you're promoting on social, we always want to think about how do we make it as easy as possible for people to take the next step. So we wouldn't necessarily want this link to just be to our website if we're all week talking about our fall collection, because we don't want people to go to our profile, click the link, find the tab on our website that says fall collection, because there's a lot of steps there that we might lose people. So whenever we can have those direct links, that's going to be more effective in terms of conversions. As we scroll down our profile, the next thing that you'll see online is our highlights. And highlights are curated Instagram stories. So your stories typically only last for 24 hours, but when you save them as a highlight, they then live on your profile forever. So if you don't have one yet, you're going to use the plus sign to create your first, and we'll start with that, and then we can look at how you edit them. So by clicking on that plus sign, Instagram is opening up every story I've ever made, which is a really great thing, because I know a lot of people worry about putting time into stories if they just disappear in 24 hours, but they don't. Instagram keeps an archive of all of them. So if there was a specific category of content that I wanted to display, so maybe it is my fall products, or maybe it's really good information about who I am or about the business, you'd want to go through and select the images that you want to add to that story. So maybe a big part of my brand is like DIYing. I could go through and select all the stories that are related to my random updates I do at our house, like way too late at night, when I should be doing other stuff. So I could go through and select all those. I'm gonna hit next. So it's pulled in these 4 stories that I've selected, and I'm gonna call this one DIYs. And the really great thing you can do with your highlights is you can edit the cover, and it's going to first give you the option to choose from one of the slides from the highlight, but you can also click the little mountain range, and it's going to bring up your camera roll. So then you can choose either like a graphic you've created or a nice photo to be your cover image. And that way it's going to feel a lot more on brand than if it was like a random screenshot from those stories. So I'm going to hit done and done. And I'm going to add. So I only see the grid and the portrait box. Do I need to add options for these to populate? So we see the grid. I'm not sure what the portrait box is referring to. So it could have, the only thing I could think of about why you're not seeing the option to create stories is if you're on an older device, like probably 5+ years old. I know sometimes Instagram has weird formatting, or on not a mobile device. So if you're on a desktop or an iPad or some kind of tablet, you won't have the same capabilities as on a mobile. And Instagram actually has done a lot of work to increase the workability, usability of the desktop, like Instagram.com. You can now post from it and do things, but you can't do all the things. So if that's one of the issues you're having, you could try a different device, or if you're not on mobile, head to a mobile phone and see if that fixes the issue. So when we're thinking about our highlights, we want to think about that key information, like similar to our bio. What is that information that makes people want to work with us? What do we want people to know when they come to our profile? So I always recommend an about highlight, like about your business, about you. So when people come to your profile, they can learn that information. You might want to have one that's about top sellers, best sellers, services. Again, think of those categories of information you want to share with your audience. And testimonials or customer shares is also a really good one to have there. Similarly to your highlight, as we scroll down, the next thing we can look at is your pinned posts. And your pinned posts are pieces of content that live at the top of your profile, regardless of when you posted it. So I have one right now. It was posted in May 2022, but it lives at the top of my profile because I have pinned it. So similar to the highlights, I always recommend like an about, and this one kind of serves that purpose for me, about something like the mission of my business. I would also usually have pinned something that is regards to selling. So if you're promoting a certain product right now or a specific service, you'd want to have that pinned up there as well. So let's say this, I mean, this one is a good like brand message from me. So you click on a post in the top right, you're going to click those three little dots, and we're going to pin it to your profile. And now my grid kind of rearranges, and that becomes the first one. And the last thing I wanted to mention in terms of our account setup is creating a Facebook and Instagram shop. So I chatted about how important it is when we're thinking about conversion, getting people to purchase from us, how important the least amount of barriers is. I think it's really important that as businesses we think about this, because at the end of the day, we want our content to be converting into sales. Views and engagement is good and important, but what's most important is that conversion piece. So we chatted about some strategies that make it easier for people to use those links to get from piece of content to the direct link in your profile. If you're a product business, you definitely want to look into creating a Facebook and Instagram shop. And this can be a really easy integration, like if you're using Squarespace or Shopify, basically any e-commerce platform. It's a really simple integration where Instagram and Facebook are going to pull the information from your website about your products, and then you're able to tag those products directly in your content, and people can go from your content to your website to purchase. So I'll pull up an example. And I just wanted to point out here how the Instagram algorithm works, since I'm getting a really good example of it here. I mentioned my love of Taylor Swift briefly, but on my Explore page, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 Taylor Swift posts on my Explore page, because Instagram is always like learning from what you're engaging with and serving you more content like that. And so same thing for your audience. If your audience is engaging with content similar to yours, there's a good chance that Instagram's going to send your content to them. But it's really curious if you go to your Explore page, if you hit that search button to see, okay, what does Instagram think I'm interested in? And then you can start engaging with content and keeping that in mind. So I'm going to search for a store that I know has their shop set up. So this is a local store in Peterborough. When I go to their profile, they have that link in their bio, but they also have this view shop. So this is that connected to their Shopify website shop, where I can see all the products that they also have listed online. They have them listed on Instagram, and then people can go and check out from there. And as I'm scrolling, we'll notice it's harder to see, but in this kind of middle, let's go top right, there's a card here. And then in the top right of that image is a little shopping bag. And that lets me know that a product is tagged in that post. So this post is shoppable. This card is tagged in it. So instead of someone having to go to their bio and then click the link, go to the website, search for this card is directly linked. So I can view the shop and then go to the website to purchase it. So definitely look into Facebook and Instagram shopping if you are a product-based business. So we have our profile all set up, all shiny and new. The next thing we want to think about is the content we're creating. And one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, how often should I be posting? And unfortunately, and also fortunately, there is no right answer. Basically, for a lot of things we're doing on social, there's not one right answer. My general recommendation is, when we're thinking about really, putting our effort into Instagram and focusing on it as a marketing channel for our business, my recommendation is 2 to 3 posts per week. So that can be reels, it can be photos, it can be graphics, things that are living in our feed, with stories added on. And stories are a really important part of marketing on Instagram. When I go to my home feed, stories are the first thing we see up there. And a lot of people spend their time watching stories instead of scrolling the feed. And they're really powerful for building connection with our audience. And that connection can really help convert people into customers. So if you haven't really gone into stories yet, but you're fairly active, like you feel comfortable creating content, my recommendation is that would be like your next place to focus. And even if that means posting once less per week, to give yourself the capacity and the time to show up in stories, there is a lot of opportunity in them, and I think is overlooked by a lot of small businesses. So we'll chat about stories in a moment, but first I want to talk about that feed content. So the stuff that's going live to your audience's home feed, just like this reel is here, but also lives on your grid. So the 3 types of content we can create are photos, which would be like your classic Instagram graphics, and reels. And reels have actually evolved. So there used to be multiple different types of video content that Instagram had. We had IGTV, we had, and then it changed, it evolved, and then we had IG Lives. Like they all lived, they held these separate kind of pieces on our profile, but now they're all under the Reels tab, so that play button. But majority of Reels, when we think about Reels, is that fun, short, valuable content for our audience done in video format. It doesn't have to be like the same silly level as like a TikTok, or you're not dancing necessarily, but video is a really effective form of marketing. So we'll chat a bit about that. And actually, this is a really good opportunity to plug our Reels workshop that we're doing together on November 2nd. So you'll get the link to register for that with the resources that you get from this workshop. So we're going to touch briefly on Reels today, but we also have another 2-hour workshop where we're going to dive into them fully, because there is so much to learn and to cover. So hopefully you'll be able to join us then as well. When we're thinking about what type of content to create, it's important to think about, what do you enjoy creating? Because social media is a long game. We're not like, very, very rarely is it that like one post goes viral and then we're all set. It takes time of building those connections in order to really see that conversion kind of roll in. So we don't want to burn out as business owners and content creators. So thinking about, what do I enjoy creating? Because yes, there's really great things about Reels. And in that workshop, we'll talk about, different ways to create Reels that aren't your face on camera or talking to the screen. But if you decided, oh, I have to make Reels, I got to post a Reel every day, and you really didn't enjoy it, most likely you're not going to see it through. And then it's going to make social media not be a great place for you. So you really want to think about, okay, what do I enjoy creating, and focus on that. And also thinking about, what does your audience respond to? So does your audience really engage with you in stories? That's like, maybe I need more time in. Does my audience really like the graphics I create? So just knowing what they have, what they're interested in too. So when we think about how do we actually come up with these post ideas? These are the 3 main strategies I recommend when you're trying to figure out what you should post on social media. The first one being a really simple brainstorm list. Now, I do think there's a lot of value in having a brainstorm session once a month, as I mentioned. So like sitting down, asking yourself questions like, what is my audience interested in right now? What's going on in my audience's lives right now? Is there cool things I've seen on social media that I want to do in my business? So that's really important too, doing that active brainstorming. But it's also really effective to do some passive brainstorming, which is just like in your day-to-day, when you're doing things completely unrelated to content creation and marketing, is probably when you're going to get your best ideas for your business. So you want to have a place to put those ideas. So I usually recommend a note on your phone. I have a note, and it's when I'm doing things like walking the dog or doing the dishes, those ideas will come to me. And it's maybe that you got off a call with a client and they asked some really good questions. So you can just jot those down. You don't need to have a plan for what you're going to do with those notes. So you don't need to flesh it out into a whole content idea or be worried about how you're going to post it. The most important thing is just getting it down on paper, because when you go to create content, it's very unlikely that you'll remember those great ideas you had when you were walking the dog. The next thing that's really important to consider is your analytics and the content that you've already posted before, because we don't need to, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel when we're creating social media content. It does take time. So we want to optimize that time and work smarter, not harder. And it's really important to remember that not everyone sees your content. And even if they did see a post, they're probably not going to remember every single post you made. So we have the opportunity to repurpose things, and using our analytics and our insights is a really great way to look at what should we repurpose, and what content performed well in the past, and how can we do that again this year. So as we're heading into fall, or we're firmly in fall now, it is helpful to look back at what did I post last October, because maybe there's images you can repost. Maybe there's a reel that you can redo, or a graphic that is just waiting for you. So when you're on your profile and with a business account, you can access your insights by clicking the 3 lines in the top right and going to the bar graph where it says insights. It's going to default to giving you information on your last 7 days. It's like that overview, but what we're really interested here is the content we shared. So under content you shared, we're going to go see all. And this is showing everything: stories, reels, photos. But we can edit this and decide what we want to look at in terms of this content. So where it says all, I am just going to do posts for this experiment. I'm going to click on posts. So now it's in the last 7 days, but I'm going to want to change this to, let's say, the last year. And the toggle lines up here, that is what metric you're using to sort. So the default is reach. So right now it's sorting my content from the last year by the most reach to the least reach. And this is really helpful for me when I'm deciding what to post, because I can see what content reached the most people. And then you can use that information to develop new post ideas. So for example, this one here, it's hard to see, but it is a very simple post that just says 5 ideas for reels, 3 ways to use your product, 5 tips for how it's made. But it obviously reached a lot of people and got a lot of saves. So I can discern that people found this content valuable. So maybe this is from March. I could just repost the same graphic maybe update the background image, or I could take this content and turn it into a reel and have those points pop up on the screen. The other thing I can notice about my top reach is 2 of them were like pop culture memes. So one being Super Bowl Rihanna and one being Love is Blind final. So that's something else I can keep in mind. My audience is interested in pop culture. My audience is interested in pop culture, so then I can keep an eye on different things that are happening. So for sure, Super Bowl in 2024, I want to be watching. I will be anyway, but thinking about like watching it with the content creator eye on it. So reach is great, but again, as a business owner, we want to see what is really converting as well. So using those toggle lines, we're going to go to set up metric is reach. We're going to click on that, and you can see that it gives you basically every metric you can search for. So I can look at post interactions, so that's likes, comments, all in one. We can look at comments, but we can also look at website taps down at the bottom. So this is going to show you what content led people to click the link in your bio to find out more information. So that's really helpful in just seeing, okay, what content is getting people to my website, and thinking about like, what is the goal of the content that right now? Like if I really want to build community with my audience and like build that sense of like knowing each other, I could look at what content is getting the most comments. And from there, make content similar to it, or depending on when that content was posted, just repost it. So definitely don't be afraid of reposting or repurposing. However, a good question we're looking at the account setup is about the link in your bio. So the link has to be a website or a URL of some form. They ask about, could it be an email address? So you can still have that contact information, but it wouldn't be that link there. There is a contact button here. So you can put in the email address, and I'll go in here, edit profile. So under that public business information, there's the contact options. So you can add your email address there. And so if you didn't have a website or didn't have a URL that you wanted to send people to, you could say, click the contact button on my profile, or give people information that way to tell them that's how you want them to contact you. The other thing to look at in terms of content ideas is what is happening in the world right now. So we're in the fall. People are thinking about Thanksgiving, Halloween, immunity, like how do they say healthy, which is my biggest struggle with 2 small children. Right? Like family gatherings, winter, preparing their house for winter, all those things. Think about what your audience is going through and what their lives look like right now. And the website, nationaltoday.com, can be a really helpful source for just seeing what's going on in the world. Now, you have to use it like with a fine tooth comb, because there are a bazillion like random holidays in the world, and by no means should a business be posting about all of them, but there's going to be some that are hyper relevant to your business that are going to be important to talk about, and just general important days in the world. So for example, October 1st is International Coffee Day. So if I'm a cafe, I definitely want to be posting about that. But I'm probably not going to be talking about International Raccoon Appreciation Day, which makes me laugh every time I see it. So going through this website can be really helpful to figure out, okay, are there things going on this month that is relevant to my audience that I want to talk about? And the important thing to think about here is it doesn't always have to be a like exact specific call out. Like I don't need to make a post that is about it being Adopt a Shelter Dog Month or National Walk Your Dog Week. But if maybe I'm a dog trainer or a dog trainer, maybe I'm going to give some tips about how to make walking your dog less stressful for both of you. So you can use these bigger ideas to then create multiple different pieces of content. So definitely check out nationaltoday.com for some of that inspiration. So we have all our ideas, we're all ready, we're profiles already. The next thing we want to think about is how do we get these ideas out into the world? I'm just going to bring this up full screen now. Actually, I want side by side still. So the main way, probably the original Instagram was photos, and photos still have a lot of value on Instagram. So even with the rise of video content and the use of graphics, photos can still work and are still an effective part of a social media strategy on Instagram. But there's a few things you can do to help make your content even better when we're using photos. So we're at my home feed and a reel shows up. And as you can see, it takes up most of my home screen. So hard to compete against that. Here's a square post with the ad sponsored, but you can see about half of my phone screen. So, you know, the content's there, but it's not that hard to scroll past versus a reel. When we look at photo content, we want to take up as much space as possible. So we want to use vertical or portrait images that are a 4:5 ratio. So here's an example here. So this is 1080 by 1350 pixels. And if you're creating something in Canva, they have an Instagram portrait template. So it's all set up that size. But basically, you just want to think about not using horizontal images. So if this was a horizontal image, it becomes really easy to scroll past, especially when people are so used to seeing that video content in their feed. The other thing you want to look at, so we're going to prioritize vertical and portrait images. We also want to think about carousels. So a carousel is an Instagram post with more than one image. This is an example with a graphic, but we can kind of pretend. So a carousel has more than one images as I'm swiping through here. The benefit of a carousel is that it increases the amount of time people spend looking at the content, which can help improve engagement. And also, if someone scrolls past your carousel and they don't engage with it, the next time they open up Instagram or a future time, Instagram's going to reserve them that content, but on the second slide. So it's like a second chance for people to see and engage with your content. Also really important when we talk about photos is the importance of high quality photos. So we don't want dark or blurry photos. We do want that high quality. We got to think about our feed as our digital store, our digital portfolio. So whether you sell products or services, you want your photos to have the best first impression of your business as possible. So if you can work with a photographer, that's great. I work with a photographer at least like once or twice a year to capture photos for my social, because I know how hard it is to like get good quality photos. If I'm just DIYing it, not saying it's impossible. Most important thing is the lighting, thinking about your backdrop. So is there a space in your office or in your store that would be really good for taking photos of yourself, for taking photos of products in front of it? You can think about product shots and really thinking about unique perspectives. So not just, white background, here's your product, but this is also true for a service, like show you in your work or show your product in use, and really set the scene for people so they can see how your product or service is going to benefit them and fit into their lives. The other thing to think about, like in terms of taking photos, so obviously hiring a photographer is an option, but not necessarily accessible for every business at this point. Definitely something I'd recommend working towards. But if you're going to be taking your own photos for social, what I recommend is still thinking about it as if you hired a photographer. And what I mean by that is if you spent the money and hired a photographer, you'd put together maybe a Pinterest board with examples of photos that you wanted. You'd gather your props, so your branded notebook and your pens, and you'd have a few different outfit changes. You can still do that if you're taking the photos yourself. You still want to go through that process, then use a tripod or some other means to take those photos yourselves. You can also consider like trading with another business owner and taking photos of them, and they can take photos of you. And as I mentioned, reusing images is totally okay, and really I would highly recommend, because not everyone's going to see your content, and you want to make sure that you're getting your best bang for your buck by reusing that content. So the next piece of content we'll chat about is Reels. And as I mentioned, we'll have a full 2-hour workshop on Reels in November. But a brief overview of Reels, I'm just going to go to the Reels tab. So that little play button in the bottom right of my Instagram screen. And I think a lot of business owners feel overwhelmed by Instagram Reels because they think of having to film really complicated videos. But actually, what we see performing really well now, I'm just looking for some examples, is like behind the scenes video. So one of my biggest steps is like, if you can take some videos and photos of you working like once a week, setting up, and it doesn't need to be, right on your face, but from the side of you working, whether you're working at a computer like this or you're physically making a product, that is really powerful things to see on social. And I mentioned that I work with a photographer often. And what I did actually today, and here's a very simple video too. What I did today actually was went to a studio in Bowmanville just to film, it's called B-roll, but like that background video content. So now I have a bunch of videos that I can then use to create Reels in the future. So nothing fancy in terms of what the video is, but I can use this with like some text on the screen to share information or a tip. That's what I did in terms of batching content today. So anytime you can create multiple pieces of content at once, so like take multiple photos, create multiple videos, that's going to save you time in the long run. Another important thing to think about with Reels in terms of getting started with them or getting the most bang with them is the audio that you're using. So as you scroll the Reels tab, you'll notice the audio in the bottom left. And once you see an arrow pointing up, that means an audio is trending. So Instagram is prioritizing it in the algorithm. So you can use that as a guide to create a reel with it. So you want to think about easy video content that you've captured, like of you working, you making your product, things like that, and what audio you're going to use. So getting started with something really simple in terms of a trending audio and a B-roll video is your best bet for getting started with Reels. And we'll dive into the actual how do you create the reels and get them posted, all that kind of things in November. And I'm just mesmerized by this 3-ingredient lemon sorbet because they are just blending up full lemons. I'm fascinated. And that's the power of video content. Can really pull people in. I have some sources in here for finding trending audio. So there's a couple websites that recommend that like put out like a weekly list of some trending audio. So you can use that as a guide as well. And then the other piece of content to think about are graphics. So the great thing about graphics is that they've become a lot more accessible to people thanks to software like Canva. And Canva is a free tool, which is really, really great. The only downfall with it, or the downside, is that there's an overwhelming amount of options. And when we're thinking about building our brand on social media, we really want to focus on cohesion. And if we're just pulling out, random Canva templates with different colors and different fonts, it's going to be really hard for people to know that's your business and to really build that connection. So it's important to think about 2 to 5 colors that are your colors and incorporate those. For my feed, I mean, it's a various shades of pink basically, but I can do lots of different things with graphics. And I definitely, my brand is a little bit more chaotic instead of refined. So I play with it a lot, but there still is that cohesion between the colors and the fonts. You might have a really simple brand that you're going to keep things really similar, and both options are okay, with a little bit chaotic or really refined. The most important thing is that branding element and making sure things are cohesive. And you really want to make sure you're prioritizing your branding instead of sharing others. So if you're a business that participates in markets or different events, you might receive posters or posts for those events that the organizers want you to post. And what I'd recommend is turning it into a carousel where you have a photo of your product or a graphic you've created as the first slide, and then the information about the event or the market as the second slide. Because again, we really want to make sure that we're owning that space on social. And similar to photos, we want to prioritize those that portrait post. So that vertical size. And this is actually a really good example of like prioritizing your branding. So you'll see here, I have like this black post and this more orangey post. So those I didn't create. They are done in collab. So it was a podcast host who created those posts and shared them in a way that they tagged me. So you can see how it looks out of place on my feed. I really like those collab posts and I'm going to keep them on there because I like that connection with this account. But just to show you kind of how out of place they look, and that's why it's so important to focus on your branding. A great question in the chat about kind of prioritizing what we're doing on Instagram. So what if we have a very few followers on our business account? Should we focus on growing followers before advertising? When we're thinking about what we post on social, we want to think about what is relevant to our audience. So when we're in that building phase, obviously we still want to be promoting our products or services, but we also need to make sure that we are providing value to our audience so that we're either is actually like the most valuable thing that you can do on social, because why social media was created. It was people connecting with people. So I think if we're thinking about those first stages of your Instagram account, it's really thinking about what am I going to talk about in addition to my product or service. So am I going to, let's say I make this cute little cat mug. I'm not just going to be posting about this cat mug every day or my mugs, but maybe I have like a really good, let's say tea recipe, but that's not really a thing. But maybe I'm sharing my 5 favorite teas for a cold morning. So really thinking about why would people follow my account? What is that value they're getting out of it? And then one of the most important things we want to do, and I think it's actually a good opportunity right now while we're chatting about it, that I'm going to jump there, is about actively engaging with our audience. So the beauty of social media is that it is a two-way street. So it's not just like a billboard where we're putting like information out there and it's like passive and we hope people see it while they're driving. With social media, we have that ability to have those one-to-one connections with people. And as I mentioned, connection is like really where that magic happens on social media. So as a business owner, we need to make sure that we are actively engaging with our target audience. So thinking about what accounts does your audience follow on Instagram, on social media? Where are they spending their time online, and making sure that we're actively engaging there. So if I know my audience shops at a local coffee shop, like that's their type of vibe, or maybe I'm targeting business owners, so I know that they're following the local chamber of commerce. There's an influencer in the area, or this well-known mom that everyone's following. Like those are the accounts that as a business owner you should be following and commenting on their posts and really having that meaningful engagement, because not only does it introduce your account to them, like, oh, this person commented on my post, I should go check them out, but now their audience is also seeing your comments on those posts. So if you're in that like growing phase or you're new, we never want to just be focused on creating content, but especially as we're focused on growing, we need to make sure that we're putting that effort for that like active outbound engagement. Looking at where your audience spends time online, as I mentioned, and really trying to be part of those communities and have authentic conversations. So it's not, hey, come to my profile, check out my services or buy my product. Maybe it's asking a question about that photo, like maybe they're on a hike and it's like, oh, what's your favorite hike spots in Bruce County? So really having those meaningful connections with people, that's really important in terms of growing. The other things you can think about in that growth focus stage is using other features of Instagram. So thinking about going live, doing collaborations, whether it is a post, like that post I showed you where the branding wasn't mine. That was a collab post where it shows up on both accounts. So you can think about doing that either in a post or in a live, and looking at tagging accounts when relevant. So like, is it your supplier? Or you've taken a photo of your desk and there is a small business's notebook on there. So by tagging those businesses in your content, there's a chance that they'll share it and their audience will see it. So we're going to pop now back up and chat about stories. So as I mentioned earlier, stories are a sometimes overlooked part of marketing on Instagram, and there's a lot of value in them for small businesses. And stories really should be the behind the scenes of your business. So if your business had a reality show, what would be in it? And that's really what lives in your stories. It is that behind the scenes of the business. and an opportunity to be a bit more personal if you want to. It's not going to live in your feed, so it doesn't stay there forever. And it's up to you to decide how personal you want to be and what you include. So I always recommend that you pick a couple things from your life that are like external to the business that you can talk, that you feel comfortable talking about on social media to help build that connection. So if I'm a lawyer, maybe I really enjoy baking. So my stories are going to include maybe behind the, day-to-day things I'm working on in my lawyer life, but maybe I also share what I baked this weekend or ask for recommendations on what I should bake for Thanksgiving pie. So really thinking about, okay, what are those pieces of my life that are external of the business that I feel comfortable talking about? So for me, this kind of goes across all my content, not just stories. I talk a lot about motherhood and business ownership. And that helps me build a connection with my audience. But I have boundaries around that. So I don't share my kids' names. I don't share their photos on social. And that's where like my boundaries and comfort levels are. So I still can build that connection and showcase that part of my life while also respecting my own privacy. So you get to choose what you share. So when we're thinking about creating a story, I'm on my home feed and I'm going to swipe to the left to open up the stories creator, or I can see the little plus sign there and that will also bring it up. So by doing this, I can either take a photo using the camera icon or select a photo or a video from my phone screen. So I'm going to choose this photo here. So with your stories, as I mentioned, it can be in the moment where you're taking things, or just like this, I could add a photo from my camera roll. So you can use, let's say it's Monday, so maybe we're doing snapshots from the weekend and like a little bit of a recap. But here in this story, there's a few things that we can look at adding in terms of boosting our stories and getting more out of them. We want to think about building engagement. And one of the easiest ways to do this are through the engagement stickers that Instagram has. So using the little smiley face in the button at the top here, that is the different stickers for Instagram stories. And the best ones that we're going to want to really look at are the poll. So this gives the options for people to vote. So the default here is yes or no, but we can get a lot more creative in terms of the things we ask people. This can be as simple as like maybe you're posting about doing a late night work session and you ask people, are you a night owl or a morning person? It can also be a really good opportunity for market research as well. Like maybe I'm putting, which one do you prefer? Maybe I have a red product and a blue. So people can really easily add their engagement and add their thoughts. And it's also really helpful actually as a business owner, because then you know, oh, I should make more. Or if you're asking people like, would you be interested in one of these services? These are really great ways to use polls for market research as well. Or it can just be really fun, some like quick and easy engagement questions. So the poll sticker is really good for that. The sticker down here that is like the smiley face on a slider. Again, a really simple way for people to add engagement. People would just swipe the heart eyes to share that emoji with you. And this other heart eyes is the same thing. People would just click on this and it sends that reaction to people. So those are some quick and easy engagement prompts you can add. Also, there is the question sticker. You can use this to prompt people to ask you questions, but it's also really great to ask for recommendations on things. So in terms of getting that engagement, it's important to think about that connection piece. And one of the ways to do that is just thinking about how your audience can actually help you. And people love sharing their recommendations on things. So it could be like where to look, like what store to look at to buy shoes for a wedding, or what do I make for supper with a pound of ground beef? And people love sharing that information and providing their point of view with you. And actually, one of my most engaging stories ever was a series of stories where I was asking questions about babysitting rates, because it was like the first time I was hiring a babysitter. So I had a poll that was asking how much do people pay babysitters these days, and I was blown away by how many people responded. I got so many messages, people sharing their experiences. So really thinking about, like, again, it can be something completely random based on your business, but people love sharing their thoughts, sharing recommendations, and stories is like the perfect place to do that. When we're thinking about getting more consistent with Instagram stories, ideally we want to make it like a routine for you, something that's going to make it consistent. So this could look like habit stacking. So like if you start your work day with a cup of coffee, is when I'm having my coffee, I'm doing an Instagram story. Or the last thing I do the day before I close up my laptop is post an Instagram story. That could be really helpful. Or also good to use like technology to help us. So like an alarm on your phone or putting it in your calendar can be really helpful too, to build that accountability and consistency. Ideally, like if we're thinking about A+ gold star, is thinking about using Instagram stories every day that we're working, or like at least 3 days a week. And that can be a goal to work up towards. So you can start by just having like 1 day a week where you're going to be showing up in stories. So let's say it's Monday, and every Monday you're getting more comfortable posting stories and creating content there, and you can build up from there. So some ideas for Instagram stories, sharing what you're working on, and using that poll feature to ask their preference, like which one do they prefer. We talked about asking for those recommendations, using the question sticker, sharing a snapshot of your personal life, again, picking 2 to 3 topics that fit with your brand and audience that you feel comfortable sharing. You can also, I'll show you how to share your post to your story. So we have a post in our feed. So I have this one about like the social media receipt. I am going to click the paper airplane icon just over here, and I am going to add it to my story. So now I'm basically cross posting. I have it in my feed, but now I can also have it in my story. But what we don't want to do is just post it up there, because it's kind of boring. We can use some of those engagement things we just chatted about, like the poll, like the sticker, to build up that engagement. So maybe I am, which one do you do most? And I'll put feeling overwhelmed. I'm not sure exactly what all these options are off the top of my head. Scrolling reels. So now I'm taking this one post. I'm still promoting that post in my feed, but I've made it in a way that's going to maybe get some more engagement on it. So that can be helpful. when you're sharing content to your stories. The other sticker that we didn't chat about that is maybe one of the most important ones is the link one. So back into that sticker button, I'm going to click the link. And this lets us have a clickable URL. So here and your profile are the only places where we can do that clickable link. So we want to make sure we are taking advantage of it. So I'm just going to put in my URL here. And you can customize the sticker text. So what shows. So instead of saying socialcatmedia.com, I could put book your free call. Now that's that link. So when people click on it, they'll be going to socialcatmedia.com. So the link sticker is also definitely one to keep in your wheelhouse as part of your toolkit. The other Instagram story idea, which can be really effective as well, is thinking about your agenda for the day. So especially if we think about like starting the day off with an Instagram story as the example. It's like if you were, let's say it's a picture of your desk in the morning and sharing what you're going to be working on. So maybe you have a client call and then you're working on a new product launch, like having just some words representing what you're working on that day. It's giving people that behind the scenes look at your business, which is really valuable and builds that connection. But it's also like a sneaky way to advertise your services because you're telling people what you're working on and it's giving them a sense of what you do and how you could help them. So that's definitely like a really easy story idea to keep in mind. If you're active on stories and you post like frequently, some things to think about when you're looking at like how much do I post, how often. If you have more stories, let's just look at one as an option. So all those lines at the top represent the number of stories. So 2, 4, 6, 8, about 20 stories today. So that's a lot. Now this is like a personal brand. So there is a stronger connection with the audience. Here's a really good example of using the polls to engage your audience. This woman has a podcast with her husband, and so they're filming tonight. And so she asked a bunch of questions to both inform the podcast, but it's really interesting, this example of how like things that aren't necessarily relevant to the business, but can really build that engagement. So I'll just do my vote and then you can see how people responded. So most people said low fuel light or a quarter of a tank. And I'm at 8% right now. I often forget. So that's an example of what the polls look like. And that's someone who had a lot of stories. Let's see if this count only had one. And here is about 10. So we can see the different like levels of stories. And the thing to keep in mind is if you have more stories, people are going to drop off. So a lot of people will see the first one, and then as they go on, there'll be less and less viewers. So as you have more stories, you're building a stronger connection with your audience, like in this case where there's quite a few, but you're not going to have as many views. When you have less stories, you're going to have more views, but you're not going to build as strong as connection. So it's really thinking about like what your goal is, and it's going to vary day to day. To boost your views and engagement, we're going to use those stickers like we chatted about. And if you're active in your stories all the time, what I want you to do is let your stories expire, which means you don't post for 24 hours in your stories. Because basically this kind of resets the algorithm when it comes to your stories. Because, and I'll just show you an example of what this looks like in my archive of stories. So let's see. I posted last on the 23rd, so on Saturday morning. And my last story had 213 views. So that would have been after a week of stories, like posting Monday to Saturday in this case. I don't often post on the weekend, but I did. So 213. I didn't post the rest of Saturday, I didn't post Sunday. So then coming into Monday, my stories have reset. And when I post, Instagram kind of pushes it to the front of the queue because there's new content. And this story from this morning has 348 views. So 150 more. And sometimes like this could be like sometimes I get stories views like in the 600s. This has only been live for 12 hours. So it has another 12 hours of people potentially seeing it. But we want to think about when we have that first story back is that we're thinking about that engagement piece. Like maybe we're putting in a poll or things like that to really encourage that engagement. So we have our visuals. The next thing we think about is our captions. And captions are really important. So our visuals is really what makes people stop scrolling, like they're looking through their feed. Your visual is going to be what stops them from scrolling. But your caption is really what converts people, whether that be into engagement, to following you, or to buying from you. So there's a lot of power in your caption. The most important thing to think about when writing your captions is you want it to sound like you and your brand. So like just like we talked about the importance of that visual branding, that branding is also really important when it comes to our captions. So is your brand funny? Is it serious? Is it a little silly? Like what are those words you would use to describe your brand, and making sure that vibe comes in to your content. And really think about like, how would I talk to a client about this? Or how would I tell my friend about this new product? And try to make it less like business announcement-y and more like a casual conversation. One of the biggest simple things we can do to make our content easier for people to consume is using line breaks. So like most people's attention span is smaller now on social, and how we perceive content has to do often with how long captions are. So if we see a big chunk of text, it feels really overwhelming to the brain, and we might just be scroll past because like I don't have time to read this chunk of text, even though in reality it's not that much content. So this is an example here about how using line breaks, so those hard returns, makes content a lot more easy to consume. By having just 1 to 2 sentences max per little paragraph, breaks it up, makes it easier for your brain to kind of take it all in and enjoy that content and get people actually like reading it. I highly recommend not writing your captions in the Instagram app. So if you do a lot of your social media on your phone, I'd even recommend going to the Notes app instead of the Instagram app, because it's a little bit easier to add those returns. You have more of an area where you can see the text, whereas in the Instagram app, it's like a small little area. But better than that, I even recommend like on your computer using a Google Doc or some kind of cloud-based Word document where you can access it on your phone or on your computer. Because I find like as we type, we edit ourselves. If we're like typing on our phone, we edit ourselves a lot more than if we're typing on the computer. The other thing you can do is use AI as like a starting point to get past some of that writer's block as well. So if you're looking at like add a chat GPT or something, you could put in like write a social media post, make sure you're putting in some of those keywords for your brand. So like a funny or encouraging social media about launch of heart-shaped sunglasses. Like you put in those specifics, and I definitely don't recommend like copying and pasting what it puts out. But there's going to be some really good like thought starters and ways to get past some of that writer's block that we all can get stuck on. We talked about the importance of a call to action in your bio, and it's also really important to have that call to action in your content as well. So thinking about when someone sees your content, what do you want them to do after it? Do you want them to leave a comment? Do you want them to engage with the post? Do you want them to purchase? We really want to be clear with our audience because they're dealing with all the noise of social media, and make it clear what we want them to do after they've seen our content. So it can be as simple as like double tap or like if you agree, leave a heart in the comment if this resonated with you, vote for your favorite in the comments, like if you have a couple different product options. In terms of the call to action being in regards to sales, we've talked about that link in bio, like sending people to your link in bio. But one thing I've been experimenting with myself and with clients that's really effective is instead of sending people to the link in your bio, is encouraging them to comment with a specific word. So let's say I have my fall pedicure specials launching, and I want people to book them. Instead of putting click the link in my bio to book your fall pedicure, you can experiment with putting comment fall, and I'll send you the link. I'll just use an example of that here. So for this launch, I put comment club, and I'll send you the details. And then anyone who put that word in the comments, I was then sending them the information. This is really helpful because it alleviates those extra steps for your audience of them going to your profile to click the link. But it's also really helpful for you because it gives you a really good sense of tracking how many people are interested instead of hoping people just go to the link. And it lets you give the opportunity to follow up in the future because now you've started this messaging conversation with this account. And maybe a couple of days later, you follow up and say, hey, just checking in to see if you had any questions about the fall pedicure special. You know, we have limited availability in October, like that extra encouragement to purchase. So definitely remember those calls to action when you're creating content. And calls to action are usually like the last part of your caption. And the first part of your caption that we want to think about is the hook that calls people in. Because as we can see here, you don't see all the content. It's going to encourage people to read more. So you want to make sure that that first line encourages people to click to read more. So as you scroll through, you can see that like you only get a first, like the little sneak peek. So asking a question or thinking of like a magazine headline can be helpful in terms of those hooks. So have you tried? Like really thinking about my top 3 tips for XYZ. I usually like using like the magazine headline as the example, like what's pulling you in when you're standing in line at the checkout. Those can be really helpful for creating hooks for your content. Next, we're going to chat about hashtags, which brings us to a good question in the chat about the difference between hashtags and regular tags when it comes to content. So hashtags are any term that are followed by the number sign, and @tags are when we're tagging specific accounts. So I'm actually going to open up Instagram on my desktop to kind of show you the difference here. And then we'll look at what that looks like when we're actually creating content as well. So just waiting for Instagram to load. So a hashtag helps curate content and is a way to tell people what your content is about and tell people and tell Instagram. So when I search a hashtag, like Bruce County, it shows me there's 86,000 posts that have that hashtag. And when I click that hashtag, it's going to show me a curation of that content. So by using that hashtag, it gives a chance for our content, our post to show up as part of this content. So that is the benefits of using it. So these are all lots of different businesses in Bruce County that are then using the Bruce County hashtag. So by using that, you're showing up in that realm. So that is the benefit of using hashtags. It's like helps the searchability of your content. In terms of the @ symbol, that's tagging a specific account. So we want to use that when our content is hyper relevant to an account, and that it's like connected to them. So for example, I'm a member of our local Chamber of Commerce. They encourage members to tag the Chamber of Commerce in their social media content so that they can share with their audience. So maybe it's a Chamber of Commerce that you're tagging. Maybe it's a supplier that you use for your products. And actually a really good example of this, a client. So they are an interior decorator and stager, and we are tagging the brands of the furniture they're using. So let's say it's an article couch, and then often those brands are reaching out to feature them on their socials or on their websites, which helps with discoverability, because if this post is showing up on articles audience, that's a whole new audience that is being exposed to your content. So that's the difference between a hashtag and a tag. Hashtags basically want to use on every post, and I'll walk through kind of more information about them. And tagging an account is really relevant to when there is a really strong connection with a post, with another account that is relevant, that you want to share that they are part of that post too. When we're thinking about hashtags, there's a few different types of hashtags that we can include in our content. We want to think about our locations. We looked at Bruce County. There's like Gray Bruce Simcoe, lots of different hashtags. And when you're looking for what hashtags to use, just doing a little bit of Instagram investigation is really helpful. So I'm going to go back to that Bruce County hashtag. But even by searching, I can see there's Bruce County photographer, Bruce County real estate. So depending on what my business is, I'm going to maybe include some of these different ones. But I'm going to Bruce County. And then I'm just going to see what these other posts are using. And if they're relevant to my business, I'm going to borrow them as well. So let's see what this duck has got going on. Sogging Shores, Explore the Bruce, Georgian Bay. So I could look at, okay, are these relevant to where I am or where my audience is? And then maybe I'm going to incorporate them in my content. This one we looked at earlier too. Not necessarily location relevant, but like Ontario made. If I'm making things in Ontario, there's a lot of ones specific to what they do here as the example. So location, the first thing we want to look at is where are we located? Where is our audience located? And making sure that we include those in our hashtags. We want to think about, are there any hashtags that our audience is using or they're following or interacting with? So I have the example here as Ontario moms. So if my audience is moms in Ontario, I'd want to include that one. And I'm going to click on it and see what other hashtags come up. my random post. So Ontario moms, adventure moms, like you can really get a sense of what is the community that I'm looking to reach, use, and then use those hashtags too to reach them. And you'll see there's a wide variety of hashtags that people use. The other thing you want to think about is your industry, so specific to what you do. So are you a wedding photographer? Are you an HVAC fitter? Like all those things could then be converted or translated into hashtags that we want to use. And then anything that's specific to a post. So if you have a post about Halloween mugs, maybe you're in like Halloween pottery or Halloween mug, like things that are hyper relevant to that specific post. When we think about hashtags, we want to avoid hashtags with millions and millions of tags. So things like hashtag love, hashtag travel, those are very oversaturated and are not going to help you get found by your target market because there's just billions of posts with it. We want to look at those ones that are specific enough that they're relevant to our audience. And in terms of how many to use, so we had a comment about 30 feeling overwhelming sometimes, and that is totally valid. As a business, we can use, or any account on Instagram can use up to 30 hashtags. And what we want to do is use as many as relevant. So we don't want to stuff in those random hashtags, as I mentioned. They're not going to help us get seen by our audience. We do want to make sure that they're relevant, but we can use up to 30, and there's nothing wrong with using up to 30. The most important things to think about is where you put them. So you want to make sure that your hashtags go in the caption of your post and not as a comment. So for a while there, we were seeing that a lot, where people were putting their hashtags in the caption. But with Instagram's updated search features, that they now pull them from the caption better. So you're getting more searchability benefits by including them in your caption instead of in your comments. And in terms of making it less overwhelming for you and your audience, we want to put a little space between our text and our captions. And this is why I recommend not writing in Instagram, because that makes it really hard. But if you're in a Google Doc or even a note on your phone, you can do multiple hard returns or put like some dots or some emojis that breaks up the last line of your caption with where the hashtags start. So for example, here I have my last line of the caption, and then I have my hashtag group. So what you can do is spend some time on Instagram looking around and copying the hashtags that are relevant for you, and then saving sets of them like on your phone or on a Google Doc. So you're not doing that searching every time. You're not writing them out every time. So we chatted about these other things we can do to boost our impact, which is awesome. And as I mentioned, I really focus a lot on how we protect ourselves as business owners and people who are online a lot, because while social media is awesome and a super great business tool we can use, it also has its negative sides of it. So we just want to make sure that we are protecting ourselves and taking care of ourselves online. So I always recommend like setting up those office hours for your social media and staying accountable to them. So like for me, it looks like not checking my Instagram from 5 to 7 every day. And often my business when I don't check at all at night either, but really making sure you have that time where you're unplugged, so that you just get that break. Because when we're constantly on social, it's hard to keep that creativity. We want to think about that weekly time offline. So maybe it's like the weekend or a certain day where you're unplugged. planning holidays. So I take a couple weeks off of social media every holiday, like every Christmas season, where I'm offline for 2 weeks, and it's amazing. And to help you do this, I definitely recommend scheduling posts. So Meta Business Suite has a great post scheduler, or you can schedule right in Instagram now. For most accounts, some accounts is just like a glitch and they don't have it. But scheduling that content is really good, because then you can set it for the time, the day that you want to post, but you don't need to be online at that time, which is really impactful. And before we go to the next slide, I'll hop back into Instagram just to show, I wanted to show the hashtags and tagging, like when we're creating a post as the example. And I'm going to do it on my desk, on my phone, I think, just because I know that's how a lot of people are creating content. So when we're creating a post, I'm just going to go from the bottom plus sign. I'm just going to choose a random picture. And we can already see it's in that vertical format, which is good. If it wasn't, we'd want to like adjust it. If I want to do a carousel for those multiple images, there's these two boxes like stacked on top of each other. That's how we can then make that carousel. So now I have the first image selected, and then I can go through and select the other images that I want to include as part of my carousel. I don't recommend using any of these Instagram filters. They're not great. So I'm gonna hit next. And a few of the things I can do here to help my content perform, I'm going to write my caption, but ideally, again, I've written this either in a note on my phone or in a Google Doc and just copying and paste it in. And as part of that caption, I want my hashtag. So I usually store mine in a note on my phone. So I would just copy and paste those. And let's just put in some random ones that I've used before or that are showing up. So let's just pretend these are the ones that are relevant to this post. So that's helping the reach of my content by using those targeted hashtags. But I can also tag people. So in this case, I would tag this specific product. So I'm click tag people, and then you click on the specific image. And I've tagged the company and hit done. So now they'll get a notification that they've been tagged in my post. Maybe they'll share it with their audience, and then maybe their audience will find me. Under this, you can also do a collaborator. So if let's say you've done some kind of collaboration with another business where like your products are used together, or you have a service that you're both going to be offering together, when you invite a collaborator, it doesn't just tag them and notify them that they've been tagged and people can see. A collaboration shows up on both accounts. So that was the example I showed on my profile where the podcast had posted it, but it still shows up on my profile as if I had posted it. So I've tagged my product, done that. Oh, so I'm going to tag my person. I'm going to add my location, another way to get found by local people. I'm going to take Bruce County. So when people look at that location, they're going to see my content. And then it also helps Instagram decide who to show your content to, because if it knows that you're in this region, it's going to want to show people content from that region. So I've got my hashtags, I've got my tag, I've got my location, and the next thing I can do in the advanced settings, not every account has this option, and there's no rhyme or reason why or why not, but it's the ability to schedule. So we'll send some links to Meta Business, which is a desktop scheduler that's free. It's through Facebook. But Instagram also has its own scheduling built into it, but it's in the advanced settings of your posts. But if you do, you can use that to choose the date and time that your content will go live on. So this would go out Wednesday at 8 p.m., but I don't need to be on my phone, which would be ideal. And really important, when we talk about taking that time off, is if we still want to have content going out, depending on how long we're off and those kind of circumstances, that you can still have some posts that are scheduled and will go live while you're off. Other things you can think about in terms of setting those boundaries is unfollowing or muting accounts that don't make you feel good. Because I think we all get into the sense of like, oh, I'm going to follow this account for inspiration because they're doing really cool things in my industry or things like that. But if they're making you feel not great about yourself or about your business, you need to give yourself the permission to unfollow them so that you're not seeing their content and feeling bad every time you see it. Also important to set realistic expectations, and not, because if we go into content creation and think like every post is going to get, even dozens and dozens of engagement and we're going to gain lots of followers, like that's not necessarily realistic, and can set us up to feeling not great about ourselves on social. So like the average Instagram growth rate is 0.8%. So 1% a month. So if you're doing more than that, like give yourself a high five. That's awesome. And if you're around that mark, it's just like, it's a good reminder that not everyone else is growing and you're not. And I think we see content, especially if you're on Instagram, if you're scrolling reels, but how I gained 1,000 followers in a week and that kind of stuff. And that's not realistic and not the norm. So I want you just to be cognizant of that and do what you need to care for yourself and really set those realistic expectations so that Instagram feels good. My last reminders before we open up if there's any questions is the biggest thing that I think that like the negative side of social media that I really work to kind of unpack and work against is like the comparison. And that's where the unfollowing of different accounts that don't make you feel good is really important, because that comparison really is a thief of joy, as the saying goes. And we really can't see what another business is going through or what that person, what their life is like through social media, because it is for most people a highlight reel. So it's really easy to compare the maybe the downturn in sales that you're having right now to a business that looks like they're crushing it on social, but we don't know the truth. So really need to really focus on what we're doing well, and remember that being you is the most valuable thing you can do. So really showcasing that point of differentiation on your social, incorporating those different pieces of your personality is so important so that people can connect with you, and build those really strong and powerful connections. So as Christina and I mentioned at the beginning, you will get a recording of this as well as a copy of the slides. So you'll be able to go back through those different pieces of content. If you are a beginner, I know it's a lot of information about lots of different pieces of Instagram content. So what I would encourage you is almost like break it up into a mini course and take things step by step. Maybe 1 week you're going to work on your profile, and then the next week you're going to play around with stories. So really take those pieces and make them work for your business. And then I am on social media, especially Instagram at Social Cat Media. So I'd love to connect with you there. I often do Q&As in my stories, so there's lots of opportunities to get my opinion, ask questions. And we are doing a Reels workshop on November 2nd. And Christina did put that link in the chat, so you can click to register for that and join us then. And I'll open up the floor now. If there's any questions, feel free to add it in the chat or unmute yourself. and we can cover those now.
Thank you very much, Kat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to end the recording in case anybody has any more questions that they want to ask.